With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome to the Exploring More podcast. We are continuing with part 2 of our 4-part interview series with our friends at the Mancard podcast around the conversation regarding the book, The Heart of a Warrior.
You wrote somewhere in your book, oh man, if I can find this quote. These days I get to hang out with men, oriented men who are not bulletproof, but who get hit far less than they used to, men who struggle, but who struggle well. And so that I love that quote because it speaks to what you just said. You know, these are, and let's be honest. In reality, we deal with men. I've dealt with men on the far Pentecostal scale. I've dealt with men on the far Catholic scale. And what I've realized is most of these men live their lives pretty similar. Divorce rates are the same, in and out of the church. So if we over-spiritualize it, we miss a major point. And the major point is this: if we know where we are, and if we know who we are, when we get hit, like King David, we get back up again. When we choose the sin path, we get back up again. Which leads me to my next question. You talked about an oriented man knows who he is. He knows where he is. Now, I like to keep things for me so I can remember them. And I just realized the third one I probably would forget. The third one is knowing the good that God is up to. So for me, now tell me if I'm wrong here, correct me, because I want to know your heart and what you're thinking here. But I wrote down, an oriented man knows who he is, where he is, and why he is.
Yeah,
now,
that's good.
How are those dissimilar? Because I think there's a little bit dissimilarity there.
Yeah. When I like why. I think it's a huge question and a huge answer for men. We want to know, because why takes me to purpose. And if we get that out of order, that's what I think that gets challenging for men. When you try to ask the first question, why am I here? You can very well not get answered the core questions of who am I? When you answer the who am I question, the fruit of that is calling, purpose, direction, and why, and the answer to why. If you're trying to strive or prove or arrange that, then you're not an oriented man yet, but you could be on your way, to be settled and bring who I am to the world and what God's given me to offer the world, rather than trying to go to the world to get a definition or understanding of who I am.
Well, and you said it in your book. Go ahead.
I've done that. Yeah, I've done that. You said that's a recipe for disaster.
It is a recipe for it's secular humanism. I mean, but what you said in your book was really good. Because, I think knowing the good that God is up to, a man who knows why he sees the good that God is up to in the midst of bad things that happen. Romans 8:28, for God works all things to good for those who love God and according to his purpose and are called according to his purpose. That guy knows that. But you said something in your book that I really resonated with, because, we talk a lot about finding your purpose, finding your mission. What's your why? Why are you here?
Yeah.
And, my why, I was in an ICU. I got overdosed by an anesthesiologist after a football injury, and I'm in ICU. I'm a Christian kid who's not living for Jesus. I'm 19 years old. I'm blind. For 3 days I was blind because I got OD'd, my eyes swelled shut, and in ICU I heard the voice of God for the first time. And he said, I want you to make a difference in the lives of teens. In other words, the mission came to me, and I spent 25 years serving in that mission. And then in a coffee shop in Sisters, Oregon, I had an experience with God on a leather seat while reading a coffee cup quote by St. Irenaeus that said, the glory of God is man fully alive. And in that with that coffee cup in hand in Sisters, Oregon, in this brown leather chair, God said to me, basically, I've just changed your heart, go work with men. And you said something in your book that really resonated with me. And you said we spend so much time, I'm paraphrasing here, looking for that mission or that purpose, but your proposal was a complete paradigm shift. And you said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that with the oriented man, the mission comes to you.
Yeah.
Do you remember that in the book?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I really love that. I thought he's going to get some hits for that, but I really, really resonate. Can you elaborate on that thought?
When the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
I've never heard that before in my life.
Oh,
maybe, maybe I need to go back and get my seminary degree.
Yeah, well, I think we're back. I think I'm back there with Confucius somewhere on that one. Actually. That when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And what we're saying, what you just read is a twist, a pretty good twist on that. What if when the teacher's ready, the students will appear?
Oh.
What if when God has you ready, He's going to bring the men and women that need to know an expert like you, who can share hope, like 1 Peter 5. Be prepared to share the hope that's within you, and do it with grace and love. And so the idea is that people are. And I know I'm not trying to be too silly here, but if I'm the Lord, and I know that I have an expert in recovery or an expert in grace or an expert, and they've earned that through their life because God's put them in those situations. So somebody who's in a marriage that's not going well, he needs a teacher that understands what it's like to live in a marriage that's not going well, and has overcome, and who has recovered hope, who has fallen in love again with his bride, and has gone through those valleys. I mean, you know the deal. It's the storms that make for the great captains.
Yep.
And yet none of us want to go through those trials, James says. But when you do, because you will, know that there's something, God's after something good. So back to what's the good God's up to in your life? That I think the whole idea that trials and training and learning, struggling well, learning how to do it, learning how not to do it, those are all parts of what we were trying to say when, missions will find you. God will bring you one man, maybe an opportunity, a bunch of people who when you're ready, right? When you're ready, he'll bring you the people that he wants you to impact and influence and affect, just like he did in your life. And it's really easy to see when we look back at our lives, the people who had the greatest impact and helped us in the kingdom the most, they weren't people that I was looking for that day. They found me, it found me. And part of that mission, again, God growing us up, he's the one who's very, very committed to fathering us as men, from boys and boyhood to men. And recovering our boyhood is really critical to recovering our masculinity.
Okay, I love that statement. Recovering our boyhood is important in recovering our masculinity. See, there's this quien es más macho, this machismo attitude out there that says you've got to put on a front, you've got to be this badass, you've got to be the toughest guy. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I totally get that, you get that. But what I try to tell men is that eye of the tiger, it comes through the eye of a child, through the eye of the innocent, through the eye of the naive, through the eye of those who are, Jesus said, oh, here it comes. Here comes Revelation right now. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
See God, yeah.
So we're talking orientation here. How can I have a macro orientation, to use your phrase, or to see the big picture, if I'm not living with a mindset and the eyes to see God? And it comes through that recovery of our childlike innocence.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the belovedness. That's the beloved son. That's that subtitle. Before you can become the warrior, you have to become the beloved son. Have the voice of the Father, the presence of the Father, the gifts of the Father, the initiation, the validation of the Father in your life. That's transformational, life changing, life settling, heart, wholeheartedness, and there's freedom in that. And that's the kind of men that we want. I want to be, and the men that I talk to, like you said, Pentecostal, the Catholic, we share this masculine DNA.
Yes.
And denominationally is not where we're divided. It's not.
And we share the same Creator.
That's right. We long to come through. We long to provide and protect. We're image bearers.
Yeah.
We're created in the image of God, and so we reflect his image, Paul says in Corinthians, and with ever increasing glory. So when you come across men who aren't experiencing that, I love when they find us and go, okay, how do we do that? That's a great place to start. How do we do that? Well, let's go back and recover from some of the things that have happened to you. One of our favorite questions, Jim, to men and women in our conferences is, what are the odds that you've interpreted your life accurately?
That's good. What are the odds that you've interpreted your life accurately?
And if there's any margin of error in there whatsoever, then you are susceptible to something false. And there's another, taking that further, falsehoods, there's another word for that, lies. And Jesus says in our story is a character who's the father of lies. And how many lies does it take to keep a good man down? Just one good one, and maybe a backup or two.
Yeah,
but that's
sub-lies.
That's the point, So if we don't understand how the story works, and that there's an enemy, that there's agents, there's orcs, there's that the kingdom of darkness is going to use us against one another and our false self and sin, but God wants to partner with us for life and love and freedom. I mean, we're in a huge story. And what you say, do, it all matters. It all matters.
Well, I love the fact that you keep referring to orcs. It makes my 100 times of watching the movie and thinking that's the greatest book ever written. It makes me feel pretty good about myself. So you talk about we default to our false self, and that's what we're talking about right here. What can you articulate that to our listeners? What do you mean by false self? What does that self look like? What does that self act like? What does that self think like?
Yeah, there's some, I'll try to swing at it generally, but, Paul talks about it in Galatians 5, and there's the fruit of the flesh and there's the fruit of the spirit. And I'll tell you, if you want to read a great list, an awful great list, go to Eugene Peterson's The Message and read the Message version of the flesh, the false self, the evident things of the false self. So when you ask that, so another thing that we talk about is, formative years. So, that the wonder years, the formative years in our lives when we're 3, 4, 5, up through 8, 9, 10. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Things have happened to us that happened early that are very much in that list of things that we might have interpreted inaccurately. And there's another category of things that have happened to us. No, you didn't interpret it inaccurately. What your mom, dad, uncle, grandparent, what somebody did to you, stranger, what they did to you was not good. So you didn't interpret it inaccurately, but it's in your system now. It's in this internal system that does need help. It needs help from somebody who can bring healing to those things that have happened to us. So what happens is the beliefs and the attitudes that we hold in our psyche, in our subconscious, that's what the term heart really is in the scriptures. We, 80, 90 years ago, we came up with this term subconscious. Well, that's old. Ancient Hebrew talks about the heart, and it's more than the Hallmark card feelings. It's about emotion. It's about intellect. It's where your belief system is stored in your heart, and that's why both kingdoms are at war over your heart. And what you give your heart to, that's your treasure. Jesus said in Matthew 6. So my point is, all that to say is background to the false self. If you've interpreted some things inaccurately, if there's some lies and the effect or infect of those lies are operational in you, then, and you've never, even though you're a believer, you've never gone with Jesus back to the dismantling of some of those beliefs, attitudes, and perspectives. I told you at the very beginning some of my story. I accepted Christ into my life 286 times. That's a belief that I had that it wasn't working. I'm not good enough. He must not be loving me enough. I mean, there's just a lot of mess in there. So where does that go when you're 38 and working in a ministry? I mean, some of this stuff you'd like to graduate from, but some of these core beliefs that we hold when we're younger, when we get older, they hold us. Yeah. What does it look like to go and like you said, to dismantle, to reform, to go through your own personal reformation with God? And it wasn't that the pastors in church were lying to me. I'm just saying that there were things in my life that because of athletics, because of sports, because of loss, and even for some of us, trauma in the abuses and awfulness of fallenness in this world, there's things that have happened to us that affect us and our ability to be loved and loved. So the false self is that character that resides with us, even when we come across the kingdom line and become a kingdom citizen. There's some of the residual effect of sin, and it comes with us across the line, and it affects us in a way that Paul, Peter, James, and John write letters to the first century believers about identity. That's not who you are anymore.
Yeah.
Why are you aligning with that old life? You're a new creation, and on and on and on. So, for me, my false self was needing to prove, self-sufficient, self-provision. With athletics. It was a tryout every day.
Yeah.
And you had to prove your worth, and you were afraid that you were going to lose what you had, or you were afraid that you were never going to get what you really, really wanted: playing time, validation, acceptance, worth. So all that stuff, Jim, is bound up in this false self conversation. It's not just like wearing a mask or a suit, which is a good illustration. It's really more tangled up in that. It's more knotted up within us. And I think Jesus is just an incredible, he can undo knots. He can make straight what the world, the enemy, Satan, and our false self has made so crooked. And what does that look like to walk with him, to see the false self not so dominant? You're an athlete. Here's the last thing I can say about the false self. When you come into the kingdom and you learn the kingdom ways, I think, like we're exploring and talking about, here's my question. Are you a good player who occasionally has a bad play? Or are you a bad player who occasionally has a good play?
I like that.
And in the kingdom, we're good men who should have a lot more defaulting. We're just doing what we do. We play well. We know how it works. We know how to enter into the battle, how to compete, how to love well, and we're not on the line. Our validation and worth is not on the line. That's secure. That's what I mean by when that gets in place, then you're more true self-dominant and less false self-dominant. But for those who have yet to make that conversion, and I do think in the faith journey, there's more than one conversion. I think there's many, many conversions of, I've learned something new. It's changing me. God is showing me who I am, and he's showing me in real time and in real opportunities to love and love well, or be loved and bring that to the world. So the false self, that's what I mean. It's a big, big, big part of the book. And I think it's a big, big encumbrance to a life that's reliant on God for life and love.
Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of the interview with the Mancard podcast. We wanted to offer our friends and allies an invitation to get a hold of the books, The Heart of a Warrior and Search and Rescue, for a great deal bundled together for $27, more than 30% off their cover prices. The Heart of a Warrior is about the significance of receiving God's love, getting everything out of the way that's in the way of receiving. Search and Rescue is much about the larger story that we live in. If we don't understand the larger story that our story is in, how can we play our part well? Together, we believe these books are tremendous resources to helping a man with his kingdom orientation. You can pick up this great offer by going to the Zoe website, www.zoweh.org. Go to the store and you'll see it featured as one of our resources. Hi, friends and allies of the Exploring More podcast. This is Michael Thompson, and I hope you will join us for a special 3-part series where SJ and I are joined by our wives, Sherry and Robin, to explore more of the great invasion of God that we call Christmas. And then in part 2, the significant ways that we can celebrate Christmas. And in part 3, how we can walk with God into the new year. Hope you'll join us for this 3-part series. Let's jump back into our interview with the Mancard podcast.
I got a few things I want to run by you.
Sure.
So, I mean, what you were saying there is I used to think faith was like a mountain experience where you climb a mountain, but it's more heliolical. It's like this.
Yeah,
You're
that's great.
experiencing
Circular,
this circular, upward and circular.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're constantly having these experiences with God as he deals with, or as you would say, unties one more knot in the rat's nest of our life, so that we can actually use that reel to fish. You said on page 102 something I thought was really profound. I think it goes back to, this is the starting point of it all. You said God. You just said it, made a real simple statement. God designed the human machine to run on himself. And I thought, you know what? We've got to find our orientation. We've got a lot of men listening to this podcast who are spiritually disoriented, and even though they're Christian guys, they don't know who they are, they don't know where they are, and they don't know why they are, and they're disoriented. And I think a lot of times in America, we're taught, in the American churches, we're taught, hey, if you just give Jesus this peace. But really, he's not interested in the peace. He's not interested in the part of our life. He wants all of it. He'll take what he can get, but he wants all of it. You said this on two different parts in your book, and I'll use this as kind of one of my last questions for you. You said this, and I love this statement. And I think this is, I wrote down in my notes, and I realized, oh, wait, you already answered it in the book. I said, what does a disoriented man look like? And what does an oriented man look like? And we talked about the orientation, but I want to take it one step beyond that. And here it's in your book. You said a beloved son is one who experiences the unconditional love of his father in a way that deeply impacts him and leaves him with these three things. And this may be my favorite part of the book: nothing to hide, nothing to prove, and nothing to fear. Now I wrote next to that, nothing to hide dash humility. Or, I'm sorry, nothing to hide dash holiness, nothing to prove dash humility, and nothing to fear. And I wrote dash hungry. Blessed are those who hunger for righteousness; they'll be satisfied. There's a hunger in this man, and the hunger for God overcomes the fears that would hinder him. And so I wrote down, he's holy. In other words, he has nothing to hide. He's humble. He has nothing to prove, which is the validation that I really had to work through a couple years ago. And he's hungry. In other words, he has nothing to fear. So I love that. Walk us through some other thoughts you might have.
Yeah, and some of that came through the contrast of the false self has something to hide, something to prove, and something to fear.
Yeah.
You want, if you're looking for, a false self detector, like a metal detector, anytime that you feel that you have to strive or prove, or you're afraid, that's Kingdom of Darkness 101 stuff. And a wonderful, important to understand 101. It can get even more sophisticated, but it's still those things.
Yeah.
For example, when you played football when you were little, they ran a play in, and it was, the backs were numbered 1, 2, 3. The line was numbered 2, 4, 6, 1, 3, 5. And what was the play, Jim?
26 power, baby.
Yeah, you just ran is a number. That's not what we learned from Peyton Manning. Omaha, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
The plays become Red Dog Blue, Alaska 56, Winjet 94, Oregon. And so, but it's still those basic plays. So, but my point is, this stuff graduates, and you should be graduating in the sanctification journey of becoming more and more and more like Jesus. And so Jesus is the example, and he's our friend, our king, our shepherd, and our savior, who showed us what does a life look like with nothing to hide, nothing to prove, and nothing to fear. And so if the false self is those things, then the true self is that thing, is Jesus. And that's what we're becoming. As image bearers, the Father wanted his image bearers back. He paid what he was glad, the scriptures say, to pay to bring us home. And now he wants to grow us up as men and women into an identity that is so special and so good that the invitation is up and into more. And the results, the fruit of an oriented man is a man with nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to fear. That's the results. I don't think, Jim, it would help our listeners to invite them to try to be that. What we want to invite them to is intimacy with God, connectedness with God, and that the fruit of intimacy with God is a life of nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to fear. You can't go out and do that That's a work of God in you. But what you can do is come to God for intimacy, oneness, and connectedness, for your sense of being, well-being, who you are, and let him tell you, let him show you. This is what we're proposing is a very interactive relationship.
Absolutely.
Not a secret admirer, not an anonymous, but one who would put on a coffee mug or a coffee cup in Oregon a quote by St. Irenaeus to move you in a way that nobody could tell you that wasn't God on a coffee cup. Really? Come on, man. No, God's got resources and tools and equipment to bring us into and further up and into life than we could possibly imagine. The question is, back to orientation, do we see it? Can we see it? Do we hear it? Or is there things in the way of receiving that kind of love? And what if those were everyday events? What if those were 2 or 3 day, 2 or 3 moments? How many moments is God in a day, right? That's the trick question. How many moments is God in a day? And then the next, where it gets indicting is the answer. Well, tell me one from yesterday. Tell me one from today. What if I'm not saying that in an indicting way? I want men to be able to say, oh, let me tell you two. Let me tell you what God did in my life yesterday. What God and I did together yesterday. Who he brought into my story this afternoon. It was so cool. And this is what. And I think when we start bringing that kind of understanding, that kind of sight, I think that's how Jesus lived. He and the Father I think they had a ball in the midst of the battle.
Yeah.
In the absolute midst of the battle.
Well, I had a pastor friend of mine, I asked him the other day, so what's God doing in your life? And he said, oh, well, I'm getting ready to do this in our church. Yeah. I said, wait, hold on. What is God doing in your life?
That's great.
So I love Matthew 6:33. I think it's a summation here. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you as well. And so I love it. In your book on page 102, you said 131, when people see, because this is the goal, right? When people see a free man, they will either call him crazy or want to be like him. And then Eldridge, in his book that you and I both love so much, Wild at Heart, he wrote, let the world feel the full weight of who I am and let them deal with it. In other words, the free man walks in the freedom that will intimidate some, annoy others, cause fear in others, but it will attract and be a magnet to those who really seek truth and who really seek to be the best version of themselves through Jesus Christ. So, hey, one last question here. At the Mancard podcast, Our Men in the Arena define manhood as 5 things: protecting integrity, fighting apathy, which you actually dealt with pretty extensively in one part of your book, pursuing God passionately, leading courageously, and finishing strong. Of those 5 things, which resonates with you the most today and why?
Wow. Today's a good day for protection. Yeah. Defending. When I hear protection, there's a defending, and there's something valuable that I want to today is it's a good day to be on watch, protecting, guard, like Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard our hearts. Mm-hmm. And the hearts of others. You got to put your oxygen mask on first, and then you can help. Then you can help others that are in the crisis, in the crash, in the challenge. And so
appreciate that, man. So, hey, how can our listeners, they want to know more about your ministry, if they want to come to one of your camps, and you do camps for men and you do camps for married couples.
Yep.
Correct.
Women and married couples. Yeah. We just came off a rendezvous weekend, which was a marriage getaway. And we've got a Heart of a Warrior weekend coming up in December. That's already kind of come and gone availability. But the one that they're taking registrations for now is in March. So yeah, we need to get you and your partner Dale there into.
Whoa! Hold on a second.
We're not partners.
We're not partners. I have a beautiful wife I'm married to.
That's funny. That's really funny, man. I forgot we're on Mancard. Your brother in arms,
my brother
man.
From another mother.
Your brother from another mother. That's right, bro.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk about that. I was thinking about getting Dale and his wife and me and my wife out to one of the couple weekends.
Yeah, those are great. And so we explore orientation together. I mean, there you are with your partner, with your significant best friend, and what does it look like to walk into orientation together? And we say all the time, back-to-back, swords out, rather than, unfortunately, so many marriages experience that face-to-face, swords drawn.
Oh, I understand that program.
Back-to-back.
We've drawn swords a few times.
Yeah, friends of the podcast can go to the Zoe website. ZOWEH is zoe.org. And then, you can poke around like you did there. The Heart of a Warrior stuff is there. YouTube, we have YouTube stuff that some of the conference sessions. The YouVersion Bible app is a great place for those who do the devotional plans, the reading plans. They can catch Heart of a Warrior on the YouVersion Bible app. And those are places to kind of investigate and explore with us what we're talking about.
Thank you for listening to the second part of our interview with the Mancard podcast. Join us next week as SJ and I are joined by our wives Sherry and Robin, exploring more of Christmas and the great invasion of God into our story. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the life of more by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.